chasing towards Gus. And then Gus is able to jump in the air, grab the bull by the horns, and flip over. And then probably went, ta-da. What do you think, Gus? Did you do the ta-da at the end? We'll take it silence as a, yeah, obviously I did ta-da. So we had bull leaping where we ended yesterday. And like I said, the Mycenaeans, they're going to see all of this bull stuff. They're going to see bull leaping, all these bull paintings, see the maze, and they say, well, clearly there was a half man, half bull monster there. We don't have to write anything down in this timeline, but it's just kind of showing where we fit in history here and the events. So we see we have about 500 years from 1600 to 1100 where the Mycenaeans are going to be the main people within the Greek mainland. So especially in the Peloponnesian Peninsula and southern Balkan Peninsula. And they're going to build all of these fortresses all around Greece. They're going to have all of these big, strong stone structures so that when the Harts try to invade, they're able to fight them off. So that when Aran tries to invade, fights them off. When Ashland tries to invade, fights them off. And it's really cool. This is when we believe we have our Trojan War. We believe it was the Mycenaean Greeks against the Trojans in this war, because yes, it did happen. Now, probably there was not a giant wooden horse, although I like to think there was. Most definitely, the goddess Aphrodite didn't win a beauty contest and then say, I'm going to give you the gift of true love. That probably didn't happen. We think it was probably over trade, but we'll talk about the Trojan War later on in this unit because it's really cool, because for so long in history, people were like, that's fake, it's made up, not true. And then we're like, hey, we found these ruins and they say Troy. And it looks like there's a big war here. Which I always love that, how history has these things where we can completely have our ideas changed just with a little bit of evidence. All right, now, we see the decline of the Mycenaeans happening around 1200, so after the Trojan War, which kind of makes sense because often a big war will deplete resources, make it harder to run things, and we're going to have an invasion coming in of the Dorians, which we'll get there at the end. And finally, we have the Greek Dark Ages from 1100 to 800, which don't get confused with the Dark Ages we say in Europe after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, but it will be similar in the fact that we aren't going to have big, strong powers in Greece for a good amount of time. Like I said, you didn't have to write anything down. This is just to give us context and understanding. All right, so the Mycenaeans. They were the first people to speak Greek. So therefore, Danielle says, we can call them Greeks then. Thank you, Danielle. So they speak Greek, so we call them Greeks. And just like I said, all throughout, particularly the Peloponnesian Peninsula, but also in the southern Balkan Peninsula, we're going to have all of these fortresses being built, all of these big stone structures, and they're by their towns. And of course, we believe these are for defense. The biggest, of course, is Mycenae, and why we call them the Mycenaeans. You know, they have their biggest spot, the part where we think was their capital. That's what we give them the name for. And we're going to know that they are going to take over the island of Crete. They are going to defeat the Minoans, which were pretty battered after, earthquakes and big tidal waves destroying everything. And they're the people who give us these stories about the Minotaur and everything. Now, another cool thing that they're going to do is they are going to set up colonies. Now, you might be thinking, Mr. Kenny, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, a colony is when you have one country going and starting a distant town or city and lands for trade. So, for example, Aiden decides to start a colony. So Aiden hops on his boat with his brother Cameron, and he winds up going over to Italy, which would be right off map over here. And Aiden says, all right, Cameron, you're going to make a city here, and then I'm going to come back and get all the stuff that you went and collected in the land. Cameron says, okay. Aiden goes back to Greece, and then after a little while, Aiden floats his boat back, sees Cameron has a big city, and goes and gets a bunch of stuff that Cameron has. He brings it back to Greece. So it's a win-win situation. And because they're doing this, they wind up going and becoming awesome traders. That's right. Just like the Minoans and just like the later Greeks, the Mycenaeans are going to see, Well, we have all of these olives. Let's smush it into olive oil. We have all these trees. Let's cut them down and turn them into boats. And they go throughout the Mediterranean trading, particularly with many of the colonies that they're going to set up in northern Greece and Italy. Like we said, we believe they fought the Trojan War, which, we've got the whole Iliad about, where we have, Achilles and all those, Greek heroes going and battling at Troy to try to get in, all because they took the Helen from King Agamemnon, which we do think there was a King Agamemnon, which is really cool too. In fact, they think they might have found his tomb. So cool. Now, the Mycenaeans are going to fall apart, though, because of invasions. We're going to have groups of people called the Dorians coming in and trying to settle in Greece. And, of course, they don't say, hey, could we be your neighbors? No, they come in fighting and, attack and conquer the land. And many of the Mycenaeans, what they do is they start leaving. So they start getting on boats and sailing to different areas so they wind up giving up the land. And after that's the Dark Ages. I would shorten pretty much all of this, talking about how they did a lot of trading. I would say how then they ended after invaders, and it was the Dark Ages. So I wouldn't write every single word there. I would keep it pretty short and sweet. Okay. The Labyrinth. So we know that there was a big maze in the palace of Knossos. And we know that the legend is that in the labyrinth lived the Minotaur. Here's a statue of the Minotaur, and here is an artist's rendition of Theseus killing the Minotaur. And of course, the Minotaur is half man, half bull. As the story goes, Poseidon wanted an awesome offering, so he gives King Minos this awesome bull that's like really beautiful, and King Minos thinks the bull is awesome, and King Minos' wife, like, she likes nothing better but to watch the bull like all the time, so she actually makes the Dalius like have her make a fake bull costume that she goes wears so she can go like hang out near the bull without the bull like getting mad and charging her. And eventually they are cursed to have a half man, half bull baby, and they're like, well, we can't like hurt our baby. But they're like, we can't really like raise this as a normal baby. So they build, of course, they have the Dahlias build a labyrinth and have them live there. But of course, this Minotaur eats children. Of course, because it makes sense. It's the only logical conclusion. If you have a half man, half bull, baby, what they would eat are kids. So when we say 7 youths and 7 maidens, that means they have 7 little boys and 7 little girls. And they had to come from Athens. That was how Athens was able to not get beat up more by the Mycenaeans or the Minoans. Now, what they would do is they would go sail a boat with all the boys and girls that are going to be eaten and snacks for the Minotaur, and then they would throw Samuel into the labyrinth, and the Minotaur would eventually find Samuel and devour Samuel. So really, it probably wasn't Caelan that ate everybody before. It was the Caelatar, which half Caelan, half bull. Now, when we have Theseus hearing about this, he turns out to actually be a prince of Athens, but he doesn't know he's a prince of Athens yet. But he's really upset when he hears about these boys and girls getting devoured. He winds up going, saying, I want to be tribute. I want to be one of the people to be fed to the Minotaur, because really he planned on killing the Minotaur. He winds up going and meeting the King Minos' daughter, Ariadne, and Ariadne says, wow, you're really handsome. And Theseus, of course, says, thank you, I know. And then she is totally in love with him. It's like, if you go in that labyrinth, you won't get out. So here's some magic yarn that will find your way out. And then Theseus is like, hey, thanks, babe. We should go on a date after this. And so he goes, finds the Minotaur, kills the Minotaur, uses the magical thread to get back out of the labyrinth, and then he winds up going and sailing away. Of course, King Minos is like, hey, you killed my son. What's the deal with this? And so crazy story. Then they wind up getting they stop on an island, and Dionysus winds up going, Bacchus It's the same guy. No, it was Dionysus for the Greeks. I always get confused with the Greek and the Roman names. He goes, hey, I really have a crush on Ariadne, Theseus. I know you two are going to go out on a date, but how about you just leave her on this island for me? And Theseus is like, oh, okay. So Theseus, when Ariadne's asleep, leaves her on the island, and then she's all sad, like, I can't believe it. My boyfriend just stranded me on an island all alone. And then Dionysus is like, how are you doing? And they fall in love and get married. And that's the gist of the myth. And then there's even more with the Dahlias. Then he winds up getting stuck, and he winds up going and building these wings with the sun, Icarus, and then too close to the sun, melting. We'll hopefully get into all of these myths a little bit later on when we study some Greek mythology. Anyways, here's an example of a Mycenaean fortress. All the stone, all of the awesomeness. Here we see a different artist rendition. You don't have to write any of this stuff, don't worry. Here are the ruins today, and we can see exactly how it was designed, which is really, really cool, I feel. Here's just some examples of their architecture. This was the Lion's Gate. Originally, it had two lion's heads poking out, like all 3D-like, but over time, they've broken. This used to be beautifully painted, and here's what you'd see marching up to it. It was supposed to be a really kind of amazing sight. Another cool architectural thing from the Mycenaeans is the Tholos. Now, the Tholos, it's a tomb, and they're the first people to be able to develop something called the dome, where you have like the rounded ceiling. And the way they did it is they piled up, they did the stones, and they had them going at an angle, but to make it so that there was pressure so they wouldn't go and fall down on each other, would be going and putting earth on top of it. So we got the Tholos there. That's what it looks like inside. That's going into the entrance. Here's another example of the Tholos and how it works. And here we have the Mycenaean death masks. And what would happen is when, we had King Caleb, when he dies, they would go make a gold or bronze version of his face, although a little flatter, and they would put it on over the body so that, you could tell who he was and what he looked like. Here's another picture of the Tholos. Here's some more of how the Tholos worked, all that stuff. More pictures of their art, lots of bull stuff that we can see, golden vessels. And here's just a little timeline with it. So, we're going to actually completely skip the next slide because there's nothing that we really need to worry about on here. And the only thing you need right here is this bullet here. So the Mycenaeans, they're going to fall because of invaders. We're going to have the Dorians coming in and pushing them out. And when the Dorians come, the Aeolians leave. We've got also the Ionians leaving. And during the Dark Ages, what we have is a common Greek culture starting, where the people in these areas, they're going to speak the same language. They are going to have the same stories, the same myths, the same religion, and they're going to have the same idea with trading. So we're going to wind up going and having Greek culture really flourish during these Dark Ages when we don't have a big, strong Greek government. How they explain this, of course, is with a myth. They say, well, we have 3 different groups of Greeks, probably because we had a mother named Helen with 3 sons, and that's why I call it the land of the Helens, because of this mythological Helen, and that the Ionians, Aeolians, and Dorians were all just different Greeks living in different spots. That's going to be our notes for the day. With that, that's going to be our notes for the day. So I'm going to stop the recording right now.